We're going to grab the, oh good grief, what is this wire called? The base wire, the base wire. Too much terminology to remember. Good morning, y'all. It is a beautiful spring day here in Texas, and it's a perfect day to work on this wire weave pendant. So let's get started. To start, we're going to need some 18 gauge wire. This is about 15 centimeters, and you'll need that for some jump rings. Next, we'll need some 20 gauge wire, cut at 22 centimeters in length. We'll also need some 24 gauge wire, cut at about 95 centimeters in length. You'll need a chain. I'm choosing to use this copper chain. We'll need a 6 millimeter bead. In my case, I'm using this Labradorite bead. You can use whatever kind of bead you'd like to use in your project. You'll also need a mandrel. This is a 4 millimeter hollow brass tube that I use as a mandrel. I just recently acquired these wire looping pliers, and I'm going to use these today, which has a step at 4 millimeters, so I'll be using that. You'll need some chain nose pliers, a pair of bent chain nose pliers, a pair of round nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, which has this flush side on it. And that concludes what we need for materials. The list is also listed in the description below if you'd like to check that out. So now let's get started on this project. First thing you're going to need is this 20 gauge wire and the Labradorite bead. And you'll want to make sure that your bead hole can accommodate the wire that you're using. Some beads have smaller holes, some have larger. This one was just perfect for 20 gauge wire. So now we're going to take our bead and center it on that 20 gauge wire as best as you can. We're going to grab this right side of the wire and just push it up and around that bead and just wrap it around it till it meets up on the other side with the other wire. Now we're going to push the other one up and around and out of the way. Just like that. After pushing the first wire up against that second wire, we're going to grab the 24 gauge wire and put it up through that first wire, up and around it, and we're going to wrap around this wire. So we're not going to do it back down by the bead, but up on the wire a little bit more. It's just easier to start this way. So we're going to give this 3 wraps to begin with, nice and snug and tight. So here's our first wrap, and the second wrap, and a third wrap. Now we're going to just smush all those wraps up close to each other and make sure everything is neat and tidy like that. We're going to go ahead and slide those wraps down to kind of meet up with that second wire up closer to the bead there. So they're just going to kind of sit right up underneath that. So we're going to wrap both of these wires together, or weave both of the wires together. So there's our first 3 wraps. Now we're going to take this wire and wrap both of these 2 wires together, or weave them together. So we've got 1 wrap around both wires, and now we're going to wrap around both wires a second time. like that. And this is what I call the 3-2-3 wire weave. So we got 3 single wraps around one wire, 2 around both, and then back to 3 around the first wire. So 1, 2, then 3. Just like that. So see that 3, 2, 3. Now we're going to wrap both wires again. And careful not to snug those wires up too close to each other so that when we go to wrap our 3 single wraps again, we have room to snug those wraps up in there. So there's the first 2 sets of wraps. There you have 1, 2, and 3 around that bottom wire, and then 2 around both wires. 1 and 2. And there we have 3 sets complete. And now we're going to do this for about an inch long, maybe a little bit longer than an inch. You just want it to go up to meet with the other side of this bead, where the wire comes out of the other side of the bead. So here you can see I'm wrapping that weave around that bead now. And then I'm going to wrap it until it meets with the wire that comes out of that bead. So here you can see I'm adding a couple of extra wraps. And now I'm going to wrap 3 single wraps. There's 1, 2, and 3. Just like that. And now I'm going to check and see where I'm at. So I want to have it to where the end of this weave meets up with the wire that comes out of the side of the bead there. So as you can see, I want to adjust it so that it's just perfectly lined up there, and you can see that it is there. Now we're going to begin weaving 3 wires into this. So the 2 that we've already been weaving and the wire that's coming out of the bead. So first I'm going to wrap 2 wraps around the first 2 wires. So I need to go around those first, just as if we're still going with the other weave, but we're just starting the beginning of the 2-2 wrap, which we're going to do with 3 base wires. Now we're going to come up between those 2 first wires, and then we're going to take the end of this wire and wrap it through the frame of where the bead is. And you'll need to be careful not to kink your wire as you pull it through. And then you have 1 wrap around those top 2 wires. And now we're going to do a second one just like that. So come between those first 2 wires and then go down into the frame or the wire that surrounds the bead. And then pull that through without kinking your wire. And now you've got 2-2 wrap there, or weave. And now we're going to go back and weave around the bottom 2 wires 2 times. And now we're going to bend the wires up and around our piece, so to conform up against the wire that is coming out of that bead. We're going to make it in a circular pattern here. So now we're going to pull our wire up between those 2 bottom wires and then back down through the frame again. Like that. And we're going to do that a second time. Again, making sure you don't kink your wire. As you can see there, I got a little loop in my wire, and you have to watch that you don't kink your wire. There we go, and then we're going to wrap 2 more times around those bottom wires. Being careful not to smash them close together. We want to be able to get the wire to fit between those 2 wires to weave the top 2 wires again. If you pull them too close, you won't be able to get your wire in there. And there's the first of the top 2. And the second. And there you can see I've got 3 2-2 weaves going there, and I'm going to continue it until it gets all the way to the end. So here we've gotten all the way to the end of where that wire meets. So now we're going to wrap 3 times around that bottom wire. Once again, we're going to go back to our 3-2 wrap, 3-2-3 wrap. So there's 3 wraps. And now I'm going to wrap 2 times, and then I'm going to wrap 3 times around the bottom wire. And we're going to continue this weave once again for about 1 inch, or until it gets all the way back around where when you bend it back up around the bead, it meets back up with the other side of the wire that comes out of the opposite side of the bead. So here we're going to gently just twist that weave right around that bead so it lays nice and flat up against the first weave, but toward the inside. And here you can see I'm beginning the 3-2-3 weave again. So there's 3, and then I'm going to do 1-2 wraps, and I'm trying to get it long enough where it just meets right up with the wire that comes out of the bead or just before it. So now what I'm going to do is I want to tie this to the original frame so it doesn't all pull apart. So I'm going to wrap 1 time around this bottom wire, 1 full wrap like this. Then I'm going to wrap around again, only this time I'm going to include the frame in it. So I'm wrapping that wire right directly to the frame, as close to the wire that comes out of the bead as possible, and pulling it nice and snug and making sure that that weave is pressed up against the bead. And then I'm going to wrap another wrap around that first wire. And so now when you look at it from the side, there should be a single wrap, one that goes around the frame, and another single wrap. Now we're going to wrap 2 wraps around those 2 wires, those 2 that we just tied to the frame. And now we're going to continue the 3-2-3 wrap again. You're going to continue until you have about 3/4 of an inch of the wrap on this tail, or about 12 centimeters in length. And then you're going to bend that tail end of the wire into a loop back down and behind the pendant into a figure 8 shape. Just like that. And then taking that bottom wire at this point, we're going to take that and twist it around to the front. Just like that. And now we need to get rid of the tail end of our weaving wire. So grabbing the flush cutters, we're going to go ahead and just snip off the end of that wire. And then just burnish the end of that wire down with our bent chain nose pliers. Like so, making sure there's nothing sticking out there. And now with that little tail end we have left, I'm going to grab my round nose pliers and just make a little loop at the end of this. We're going to bring it around nice and tight and snug. Just like that. Okay, so now we're going to flip that piece over and we're going to grab the, oh good grief, what is this wire called? The base wire, too much terminology to remember. Anyway, we need to bend this into a nice little U shape, and or whatever shape you want to make it in actually, but for this piece I'm doing a little U shape. And I'm going to cut off this little edge, leaving about a 12 centimeter tail there. And with my round nose pliers, I am going to make a little loop. And there you can see that loop. And next I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers. And I'm going to twist this little loop into a little swirl. Just like that. Keeping it nice and snug up against the frame, and there it is. Next we need to make our jump ring. So with these bail making pliers, I really like these. They have 6 different sizes that you can use for mandrels, and I'm going to use that 4mm size. And placing the wire between the barrels, I'm going to go ahead and start pulling that wire around the mandrel like this as I twist the wire in it. And I'm just going to keep going until I get to the very top of this mandrel size, because I can use all of these jump rings in different projects for later. So I like to just go ahead and do that now. And there you can see I've got a nice little coil of 4mm coil there. With my flush cutters and the flush side of my flush cutters facing the coil and the other side facing the tail end of the wire, I'm going to make a flush cut just like that. And see there, I've got a nice flush cut wire at the end there. Now with my flush cutters, I'm going to flip them over the opposite direction and cut the other side of the next wire of this coil. Just like that. And I've cut my first little jump ring. See there, you could see the ends of these wires are flush cut. They will line up right straight with each other. The rest of this I'll save for a later project. Now with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab one side of that jump ring and my bent chain nose pliers the other and give them a little twist. And then I'm going to pop my little piece on to the jump ring. And then I'm going to twist this jump ring back into shape. You never want to pull them apart because that will misshape the circle or the round jump ring. you'll have a wonky looking jump ring. So now I'm just going to twist it back and forth, which helps to harden this jump ring and get it just right so that they line up right perfect with one another. So you could barely tell where the end of this jump ring is. And there's the completed piece. Now all that there's left is to add this chain. We're going to do that now. And there you have it, guys, the completed pendant. What do you guys think of this piece? Again, I love Labradorite beads. They catch the light and refract it, and I think they're just gorgeous. Thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and we will see y'all again next Thursday.